I'm Russell Van Kreinberg, Editor-in-Chief of the Boys Club, and this is Mixology 101. So, how do you know when to stir a cocktail and when to shake a cocktail? We all know Bond likes his martinis shaken and not stirred, but is he right? No, he is definitely wrong. A good rule of thumb is you always want to stir a drink when it contains only clear liquids or spirits. You also want to stir when a drink contains any carbonated ingredient, as shaking it will flatten the fizziness. And if you've ever shaken a soda bottle before opening it, you know just what kind of mess that can make. So, when do you shake a drink? Anytime a drink contains a fruit juice, thick liqueur, dairy product, or eggs, that's when you're going to want to shake it. How did the stir versus shake war come to start? In the Gilded Age of America, when bartenders began mixing drinks with ice, and consequently the first true cocktails came to be, drinks were shaken, stirred, or tossed almost exclusively based on entertainment value. Flashy bartenders shook drinks high above their head and even tossed contents from one glass to the other through the air, while more modest and reserved upscale bartenders stuck to using a spoon. The science behind mixing hadn't yet been perfected, and drinking was more about the experience than the final product. It wasn't until the 20th century that bartenders began to call themselves mixologists, and they began to apply science to bartending. The obvious reason why we don't shake carbonated drinks aside is for clarity and texture. Shaking typically will cloud clear liquids and create foam. By stirring drinks made of all clear ingredients like martinis, Negronis, and Manhattans, you can retain the clarity and texture of the liquors. The first is simply an aesthetic choice, and the latter affecting the mouthfeel of the drink. Some delicate ingredients like gin can even be bruised, and that's just an easier way to explain the process of aldehydes bonding with oxygen during the shaking process. This oxidation can change the flavor of a drink slightly, giving the gin a sharper or more bitter flavor. In fact, did you know in the 90s, the University of Western Ontario conducted a study to determine the antioxidant effects of stirring versus shaking cocktails? It turns out shaking is actually a little healthier, but that's not really important right now. Shaking a cocktail, on the other hand, is a very violent process, which is often needed for drinks that contain liquids of various consistencies and ingredients that are very thick. Of course, clarity and texture are only half the reason. Remember how I told you that bartenders began mixing drinks with ice in the 19th century? While they may not have known it, they stumbled on one of the most important aspects of mixing: chilling and diluting. When ice is introduced to the warmer ingredients, such as the liquids used to make a cocktail, an endothermic reaction takes place, resulting in the melting of the ice and the cooling of the drink. But that's a whole nother episode. All you need to know is, since stirring is a relatively calm process, the ice melts slower and dilutes the drink less. Shaking, on the other hand, is far from calm. As you shake a cocktail, the ice inside the shaker is thrown around and begins to break up, melting quicker and cooling the drink even faster. That's right, when you order a drink shaken, you're ordering a weaker version of its stirred counterpart. Of course, dilution is not a bad thing, and is often very important in the mixing of a cocktail. Before the introduction of ice into mixology, many bartenders would actually add water to the drink to ensure the flavor was spot on. So, now that you know the rules and why we use them, you get to choose when you want to break them. So, if you like little shards of ice floating on your martini, you should just go ahead and order it shaken. But don't go tell a hardcore mixologist. Wait a second, don't you want to know how to shake and how to stir? It may seem simple, but there are a few things to keep in mind. First, the ice. When shaking, you'll want to fill the shaker half full, but when stirring, you should completely fill the glass to the top with ice. Shaking is a vigorous process. You should move the shaker up and down or back and forth quickly and violently. The point here is to break up the ice and get all the ingredients completely mixed together. Stirring, though, should be a calm process, so stir gently. You don't want to break up the ice while stirring. As for timing, you want to stir longer than you shake. You should do both until the glass is cold and frosty, almost painful to hold. Shaking should take about 10 to 30 seconds, while stirring will take 30 seconds to a whole minute. Of course, you could just throw everything in a blender and call it a day. So that's why we stir and why we shake cocktails.